ELS to SBR bulk update. Hi, my name is Tanya, and in this video we're going to look at identifying returns that qualify for you to run the ELS to SBR lodgement method change in a bulk update process. We'll look at how to run the tool, tips on using the tool, and any additional resources that may assist you. Identifying returns that qualify. Using the 2017 ELS to SBR lodgement report, we can identify returns that qualify for the change in bulk, and these are returns of the 2017 year that have a return type equals advance in the report, which is the APS tax forms, and a form type being individual. The tool only works for this particular criteria. The individual returns was the last return to move from ELS to SBR lodgement method, so therefore we've focused on this in that tool. If you're not familiar with this process, then please review the ELS to SBR lodgement report video for more detail on this. But I'm going to show you what we're going to qualify in this example. On a particular workstation, you can see I'm already logged in to Central Login, and I've already saved the report into the ADV 2000 folder. So I'm simply going to open that report. Once I'm in there, I'm simply going to refresh the data. It's going to list for you all the returns that are currently selected at the ELS method. From here you can filter by return type. You're only interested in advanced returns, which is all I've got, and the form type being individuals. So in my example in my database, I have 4 returns that qualify for me to run the bulk utility. With this number of returns, I'm more than likely to do it individually, but for the sake of the exercise, we'll show you how to run the tool, which will run it for all 4 of these. You can see also that some of these returns are at the started status and some of them are at the signed status. For the bulk utility tool to run, it will need you to select a pre-selection of which status you are going to use that would be editable for us to do the change for you. So we need the status to be at an editable state to do the update of the lodgement method type, then redo the validation and close and update the status back to what it was. So in our case, we're going to use the started step as that status. The other return types that have not been lodged and are still set as ELS, they will be excluded from the bulk update tool. So in this case, my 2 company returns, I would need to go in and do that process manually. So depending on the number of returns that you need to review will depend on whether you choose to use the tool or whether you do it manually. So I'm going to use the tool. I'm going to close. I'm not going to save that. So in order for me to use the tool, I again am logged into my workstation. The tool runs from an individual workstation and is accessed from the C program files x86, advanced tax and the framework folder. There is a new file that has been released after the 20th of the 4th. If your processes have identified as being run against the finished process, then the new file will need to replace this file in this folder. That's available for download. That will ensure that we're not converting returns that have already been finished. I don't have any finished returns, so I'm okay to open this version. So the bulk utility tool, the first option that I must do is choose the central directory. And in my case, I'm leaving it our standard C ADV 2000. From this workstation, I'm starting the engine. The engine will then ask me to select what is the editable status that I would like to use as a temporary measure when it's going in to open the return for me in the background to do the switch for the ELS to SBR. In my case, I'm sticking to the standard status of started. But it must be an editable status, which this one is. This is finishing setting my prerequisites. So I select that button. It has identified that there are 4 returns that can be converted to SBR. This is also the exact same number that matched from my lodgement report, ELS to SBR. So I can be confident that that will convert. The process will start to convert the 4 returns from ELS to SBR. We have a backup message here that you may proceed to take a backup and click yes to begin the process. If you're not sure how to complete a backup, please ask your IT administration. As we open this process, it's using the process from the workstation. So the workstation is doing the work through to the server, and there's a certain amount of memory that it will be using as this process goes through. So if you've identified that you have hundreds of returns to be updated, then I would recommend that this process be done after hours. The process time per return will be variable, but if you allow for around 45 seconds per return, that will give you a rough estimate of how long we think the process might take. The process that you can see here there is a cancel button. So at any point in time, as a user, I can press cancel and it will cancel where it is at that point in time. So if it hasn't finished that return, it won't have finished processing that change. If I cancel it once it's finished Ivan and has now moved on to Isabel, it will have processed Ivan's return, as it finished the 25% in this case, and it's now halfway through Isabel's return. So if I do that now, the process will stop and it will save where it was at. So in the release notes, or the notes that support this video, you'll also see the directory of where these files are kept for the log files. As it's stopping, you can see that it's taking its time to make sure that it's updated the process. You'll see here that the error message has come through and it's shown me 2 returns, and that it's given me what the status was of those 2 returns, and it tells me that it was cancelled by the user. I could export this report at this point in time, or I can re-continue. It also gives me an idea of how long it was using that particular memory and how much time was elapsed. In this example, I'm just simply going to continue. I've released the memory and it will start again. So it will go through and we'll let that finish and continue off. You'll see that the return, it does say that it's opening the return in that editable status of started. It's then converting the return from ELS to SBR. It's then running the validation. Then once it's successfully completed the validation check and there is no errors, the status will be returned to its pre-upgrade status. If there are errors in the SBS errors for that return, as it's changed from ELS to SBR, then the status will remain at started. So there'll be a status change for these returns. So when we export the report, the ones that we're looking for initially will be the ones that have had a status change. They will be the returns that you will need to open manually and make some corrections to those returns. The SBR errors and warnings that appear don't necessarily mean there's anything that needs to be changed in the return, simply that the information that the ATO was requested from ELS to SBR has changed, and we need to make sure the information is complete and correct. Once that's finished, the conversion window will pop up and you may select OK. At this point, I can see now that I have all 4 returns in the error log, or the log file, and I can export this. Save the file and open that file in Excel. That file is now in Excel. The next thing that I would suggest that you do is you add an additional column. In the additional column, we'll test to see if the previous status and the post status are the same. And this can be achieved by using the equals exact function and using the previous status, comma, and then the post status. Copy that value down your spreadsheet and then turn on a filter. So we now have our 4 returns in my example. You may have hundreds or a handful. If you go through your test, you will see if there is any returns that have come from a false scenario. And in this case, we have a return here for Isabel B. Person that has some ELS errors in it. it was not able to validate those during the process of the bulk update tool. So the previous status was signed, it's left it in a started status. So it means I need to go into this return and update this return. So let's go in and have a look at that process. We'll go into Tax Manager and open that return. The return for Isabel B. Person is started, so we can simply open the return. Looking back at your report, the first thing that you may do is select the Refresh Validation option. That will clear your validation errors and it will refresh and retry and do the validation. So this might be the first step that you do to see if you can clear any of your SBR errors that were popping up in your Excel report. So if I have that one open there, I had a warning message first about the BSB in the bank, and then there was another SBR error for the declaration signatory. So I can have that open in the background and I can let that refresh. I can click on my validation now and see if that has cleared the error. If you still have an SBR warning or a SBR error, you may also go over to your references page. From here you have access to your web browser and the MyAPS portal. In here you can type in the article number 18301 for any known issues for the Reckon APS tax release. So if you're finding you are not able to clear your SBR error, please take a look at this article. The article in here has all the different descriptions, and they may be validation errors that will come up. They'll have more detail in a KB article that's listed for that particular error, and we'll also detail the status of this. So if there's a workaround, we'll detail that. If it's to be corrected in a future release, we will have those numbers in here, or what release it was corrected on. Sometimes you can have a misleading information in here, and you might simply have to remove information, save the return and paste the information back. That has been known to clear some of the SBR errors that don't clear themselves on the refresh process. In this case, we still have an SBR warning. We could still complete the return and change it back to sign if we're not using that process, as it's a payable. If I'm using the completion process here, then I would redo those steps that I would normally do to complete and get a validation code. This is an optional step, so not all systems that are using the APS tax forms will use this. If you've not been using it before, you don't need to do it as part of SBR. It is a process of an internal change you could talk to your APS representative about. Once you've changed that, you've completed it, we then suggest you complete the pre-lodge process and then go back and put the status for this return back to signed. So everything else that you had done on that return should have remained the same. If you had any hold lodgement dates in Tax Manager, they will still be there. So that has now completed that process and you've now addressed this issue. So to remove that, you could simply just delete the row and then we can go back and revisit the ones that were true. So I've dealt with A person Isabel. I can see there's nothing to do with Ivan. He has no errors at all and he was still stayed at signed. It just meant it saved me 45-50 seconds to do that process manually. With the Ivan and Isabel A people, they were already at the started status. So if I didn't run the bulk update tool, if I had opened that return manually, that status for those two people would have changed to SBR when you opened it from the 2018 release. However, the first time that you opened the return after that release, it would have taken that 45 seconds to go and validate the return. So by doing that process in bulk, I have saved that 45 seconds from opening and doing that validation in that process. So if you've still got a lot of returns that you haven't actually finished, that will save a little bit of time as the accountant goes in to finish the return. It may also mean that you had statuses there of started, as you don't change the status to signed or lodge as part of your internal process. So it will speed up that validation process in that instance. So let's revisit how this tool has worked. We've saved the new ELS to SBR executable to our program files x86 Advanced Tax Framework folder. We would replace the file that was installed with that 2018 release so that we can exclude the finished status along with the lodged and rolled over statuses. We don't touch those ones in the bulk tool. When we ran that tool, we had to select an editable status for the process to change from ELS to SBR. That will complete the change within the return, and the validation process will happen while it's in that editable state. Usually that is a temporary status, or it will return to the pre-change status upon completion successfully. Once the tool has been finished, it will be able to export the information for you to review. You do have the opportunity to cancel that at any time. That will release memory. If you have a lot of returns, the system will not allow you to exceed 1 GB of memory when you're running that tool. If the memory does exceed that, the tool will self-stop, okay? And in your notes, you'll have the directory of where that export file will be sitting. You will then simply restart the tool and it will start again from where it last left off. So you'll never miss anything. So overall, what have we done? The process runs from a single workstation. As we said, you need to allow time for that to complete and the appropriate resources. Average 45 seconds per return. Use your lodgement report to quantify how many returns that are affecting your database. Updating the started returns will assist in the speed of opening returns, and it will depend on your process. So it is worthwhile to run them even though you have a lot at started. Check your pre and post status in the export of results. Filter for all false results and update these manually to address the SBR errors and/or warning messages. If you need more information, please visit us at the Practice Hub and look at the latest tax updates and other important information from APS to you and your team. We hope you find this information useful today. Thank you.